Imagine a person sells his smile to become the richest person in the world. Something similar happens with Tim. At the beginning of the story we see a boy named Timm Thaler who was laughing non-stop. The image of the whole class was being spoiled by his unbridled laughter. He tried to control his laughter, but when he saw the principal's mustache, he burst out laughing again. This made the rest of the children laugh loudly. Tim's mother died when he was a child, and now his father used to work hard to support the household. Tim always had a big smile on his face. A girl named Ida was his best friend. They both often went to watch movies together. Ida walked with a limp since childhood, but when Tim was with her, there was a smile on her face too. Despite his poverty, Tim's dad tried to fulfill all his needs. Both father and son used to go to watch horse racing, and they also bet on which horse will win. One day they were returning back after losing a bet. So Tim's father said that he used to be the boss of the Grand Hotel. Then one day his father married another, from which Tim got a stepmother and a stepbrother named Irwin. In the beginning everything was fine, but soon they began to misbehave with Tim. Irwin also breaks the last gift Tim's mother gave him, which was very precious to him. Still, Irwin's mother asked Tim to apologize. The next day, when Ida asks about the injury on his face, Tim lies that he was hit by a wardrobe. Then they went to see a movie where Tim started laughing out loud. Seeing him laughing loudly, all the people sitting there also laughed. The next day Tim and his father were watching the horse race again, and this time they won the bet. Just now his father collided with a man with black glasses. Tim was very happy to spend time with his father, but how did the poor man know that it was last day of his father? We see that Tim's father died while constructing a building. His stepmother was not saddened by his father's death, and she didn't even get a good coffin for her husband. Tim runs away crying after being insulted by his stepmother. Then he went to the racecourse remembering his father. There he found a 5-cent coin. Then the man of that day came in front of him and said that he is his father's friend. Then he asked Tim to bet on a horse named Westwind. Westwind won the race, and Tim made a good earning. He came crying to buy a coffin for his father, but 2 thieves cheated him by showing fake magic. Tim realizes this when he meets Berben, friend of his father. He lends Tim some money and asks him to meet on the next day at race time. The next morning, Tim's stepmother sent him to get the cake. He ran to Ida's bakery, but there his debt was already too much. Tim laughed and said he would rob a politician and repay the loan. Then he reached the race place and waited for the Baron. He fell asleep on the bench and then the same 2 thieves saw his coin. When Baron arrived, Tim had no money to bet. Then Baron made a deal with him. He will buy Tim's smile and in return he will help Tim win any bet he makes. Poor Tim didn't know the origin of the deal, so he reluctantly signed it. As soon as he signed, the smile on his face disappeared. His smile was now bought by Baron. Then the Baron reached his office where the 2 thieves were also. Actually, they are Baron's own people. The Baron had turned them into rats so they could keep an eye on Tim. Meanwhile, Tim returns the bakery loan and then takes Ida to see a movie. Despite being such a good movie, Tim didn't laugh once. Later, when Ida asks him about the money, he replies that he robbed a politician and took the money. Seeing his serious face, Ida believed this true, and ran away from there. She later told her mother about Tim, and there a woman secretly heard this story and then she spread the rumor in the whole neighborhood, that Tim has robbed the politician by fatally attacking him. When Tim returned home, Irwin took money from his pocket, and his stepmother scolded him very badly. But then Ida's mother comes there and tells the truth that Tim is innocent. Tim realizes that Ida is the one who spread the rumor. He told everyone that he won this money from a bet. He had also a receipt of it. Then the next day his stepmother took Irwin and Tim to the horse race. She wanted to see if Tim's prediction is true or not. Thanks to Tim, she won the first 2 games, but she got greedy and bet all the money on the 3rd bet. Tim bet on a horse named Halali. Although he looked a little weak, eventually Halali came 4th in the race. Seeing this, Tim's stepmother got flares up and scolded him. But then it was announced that the first 3 horses are out of the race, and Halali is the real winner. Now his mother swooned with joy, and got the money. Poor Tim stood outside the Grand Hotel. There he meets an old man named Kreskemir who works in the hotel. He asked him for a job. Kreskemir flatly refused and asked him to return home. At that time, Tim bet him that he will definitely get a job in this hotel. Then the hotel manager Joven told Kreskemir that she needed a boy to carry the luggage to the elevator. Kirschmir immediately named Tim, and it was arranged for Tim to stay there. The next day he met Ida, but Ida said nothing to him. Tim also wanted to tell her about his new job, but both of them went their separate ways without saying a word. Poor Ida returned home crying. She saw that Baron was already in the house, and her mother was unconscious. Baron set her to trick into thinking that the Tim won't play with her because of her lame legs. Then he put a deal in front of Ida as well. Meanwhile, Tim makes a bet with an idol maker that he has an idol on his father's grave. That idol maker knew that there was no such thing, but because Tim can't lose a bet, a statue also grows on his father's grave. Now he just had to get his smile back. He went to find the Baron at the race site, but he was stopped outside because he had already earned a lot of money from them. Then the poor boy returned to the hotel disappointed. He saw that the cleaning woman was going to kill 2 rats. Tim took this responsibility, but then instead of killing them, he set the rats free. This melted the hearts of these rats. and they returned to office. Tim sat alone, lost in his thoughts of Smile. Suddenly, he read that according to the deal, if he loses a bet, he will get his Smile back. Now he bet with Kreskemir that the Baron would come to the hotel the next day. Next day same happened, and when Tim asked him for his Smile, he flatly refused. Baron took off his glasses and Tim looked into his eyes, which seemed familiar to him. Then he bet Kreskemir that today the cakes will come from Ida's bakery. Then a chef came and asked Tim to bring cakes from the best bakery in town. When Tim got there, he saw Baron's eyes on Ida's face. He then tries to bet Ida that the Baron will return her eyes. Ida also agreed, and in a blink of an eye her eyes were back to normal. Meanwhile, Baron's eyes suddenly began to burn. He immediately puts on black glasses and runs away. When Tim returns to the hotel, Kreskemir is convinced of his abilities. At that point, Tim tells him that he made a deal with Baron that he will win every bet, but instead his Smile is sold out. Hearing this, Kreskemir decided to help him get his Smile back. Then he made a bet with Tim that he could become the richest man in the world. Suddenly some people came to the hotel and took Tim away. They said that the richest man in the world has given his entire property to Tim. At his mansion, Tim meets the Baron, who is actually the twin brother of the richest man in the world. At his request, Baron returned Tim his Smile, but only for a few minutes so he could take a photo for the newspaper. After that he once again took away Tim's Smile, and said that the deal is still the same. Baron tells him that he is behind all the dark deeds in the world, and when Tim wins a bet, a small part of his soul dies. After hearing the news of Tim's wealth, his stepmother and Erwin come to borrow it. But by now Tim was completely stone-hearted and parts of his soul were gone. He got angry and threw them both out of the mansion. Now Dam wanted to meet his friend Ida, but the Baron says that his new life could be dangerous for Ida and Kreskemir, so he must never meet them. Meanwhile, Ida is worried about Tim when she reads about Tim in the newspaper. She arrives to meet him at the Baron's mansion. Tim said that Ida should stay away from him because they don't live in the same circumstances anymore. Hearing this, Ida's heart was shattered. Later, when Tim and Baron were watching a movie together, so we found out from these thieves that Tim's father was killed by Baron. Both of them now wanted to help Tim by going against Baron. Meanwhile, horse racing posters in Timm Thaler's name were put up all over the city. Ida went to see Uncle Kreskemir at the Grand Hotel because she found Tim's Smile a bit odd in the pictures. Then Uncle Kreskemir told her about the deal between Tim and Baron. Now they both decide to help Tim get his Smile back. The next Sunday Baron and Tim went to the horse race, and Ida and Kreskemir also started chasing them. Ida was trying to get on stage to meet Tim. Then she was caught by these two thieves. They decide to help Ida when she reveals that she is Tim's friend. They lie to the Baron and bring Tim down to Ida and Kreskemir. Ida asks Tim to make a bet that he can never smile, but Tim refused to bet. He said he no longer needed a smile. Meanwhile, Baron became suspicious and started looking for Tim. Ida and Kirschmir still hadn't convinced Tim to make the bet. Then Ida uttered a silly joke, and suddenly a small smile appeared on Tim's face. Now the Baron's veil was removed from his eyes. Then Ida took his hand and bet him that he could never smile. That's when the Baron came there, and extended his hand and began to lead Tim back. But Tim accepted Ida's bet. In the end, friendship and smiles won over power and money. Now Tim was start smiling again. As they came out they saw that the Baron had turned into a very old man. He turned his thieves back into rats before disappearing, but Tim promises that he will always take care of them. With this, movie ends here. If you like this video please subscribe this channel.